Now this one here is one that I'm going to cover that we're going to call the percolating Pontiac story. And it was very, and this is kind of gives you sort of a learning process of where I wound up getting some of the information I used when we were working on that little Ranger over there, where we finally got with, after, you know, he blew coolant and air through everything, and we pushed the impeller closer and we made it all. So, and the guy drove the truck and he said, well, you know, it seems like it's doing better, it's running warmer, and I'm actually getting a little heater activity now. Yeah, I don't know what else may be wrong with it, there may be, but he's driving it right now and he seems pretty happy with it. But the long and the short of it is, we got this thing right here, 88 Grand Prix drivetrain 2.8, automatic transaxle. Now this is the same engine, excuse me, that's in the basically the same engine that's in all of the newer model GM cars all the way up to almost today. But you got like the 3.9, it's in the Impala that we've got, and the 3.1, it's in that one out there. It's basically board and stroke versions of this same engine. Mileage 154,000, complaint scraping noise with engine running. Okay, he's not really having any kind of issues with it, except he's making a scraping noise when the engine's running. So I come back from lunch today and I find a bunch of my people gathered around this Pontiac Grand Prix with the hood open, making a really ugly scraping sound. They'd already pinpointed the problem, because the water pump pulley on this one is like an inside out smooth pulley up here in your face, and it was rubbing against the housing. And it's, you know, when the belt was driving into it, running against the housing, and the bearing was gone is what it was, so it wasn't holding the shaft, and of course it wasn't throwing the belt either, it was just scraping. But the water pump on this engine is right on top and fits into the timing cover. As a matter of fact, this is the timing cover from an engine like that. And this is where the water pump is, and when you're standing there looking at it, the water pump's right here. But now the pulley is pretty well got this, the bolts all covered up. When you pull the belt off, pull the pulley off, you can pop this water pump off, scrape the gasket, and put it back on there, and you'll be through in 20 minutes. I mean, that's how easy this water pump is to change. It'd be wonderful if more of them were like that. You know what I mean? But anyway, that one there, that was that water pump. Okay, so when my guy got the water pump off, I looked at the timing cover, because the pump impeller spins next to a machine surface in the cover opening. And so I noticed some scoring where the impeller had contacted the timing cover, but it still looked serviceable. And I'm talking about this surface right here. That surface right there, which this is the reaction surface for the timing cover. All right, and so I says, well, we'll see anything like that. You know, it's got some marks on it, but I'm not that worried about it. So we put a new pump in place, the belt and pulley were installed, and they're prone to get airbound. That's why they got bleeders on them. Pay attention when you're filling one up, and make sure that you open the bleeders, and when you pour the coolant in there, all the air needs to go away, and you'll see coolant squirting out the bleeders, and you lock them down and crank it up, run it through, make sure the thermostat's open, hear the fan kick off and on. If the fan kicks on and off, on and off, on and off, you know everything's fine. If the fan kicks on and stays on, it keeps getting hotter, it's not fine. All right, so this one here had a petcock on the thermostat housing, but no other bleeder. Somebody had put one on there instead of that other thing. All right, so we took the heater hose off next to the water pump. That's what the water pump looks like with the pulley off of it, by the way. We took the heater hose off next to the water pump, poured the block full of coolant until it gurgled out in the radiator filler neck. See, what I like to do is I like to figure out a way, if I can, if the thermostat, particularly on the ones where the thermostat's on the bottom, which is made so that it'll be easier to fill up and won't get airbound, I like to hold that hose up, and I like to fill that thing completely up where it's all full and there's no air anywhere, and you plug it back in, but you still got to run it and make sure everything's okay. So I knew this thing was prone to overheat, and I didn't want it overheating. So the car's owner come walking into the shop just while we were warming it up, and we had the petcock open, and in a short period of time there were steams spewing out the petcock, but there wasn't any water. In other words, you know, I always like to see a little bit of, you know, if it's working there, we put it back together, I want to see water there if I open it a little bit, but there's nothing in there. This thing's making air. But it hadn't been overheating before. It didn't overheat before we changed the pump. Now we changed the pump and it's overheating. So somebody tell me what's going on.
Has something to do with that scratched up surface?
Yeah, well, this might have to be, you know. But, I mean, wouldn't it have been just as scratched up before we changed the pump?
Yeah, but the pump would have been staying up against it.
Right.
Yeah, because of the bearings and all that, right? All right. Now, he said it was overheating at traffic lights. or something, you know, I mean, talking about that. I said, did it overheat? Well, actually, he took it to lunch, and when he brought it back, it was overheat. He said, did it overheat before we changed the water pump? And it wasn't, but it was almost kind of knocked off, it wouldn't be out there the money. I didn't want him driving it and burning it up, you know? Well, the hot light came on when I was stopped at traffic lights, but it always went off when I was driving, and this is the first car I've ever owned that had no temp gauge. So he basically was seeing a hot light, that's all he was seeing. And I may be out of line with my happenings and all that kind of stuff, one way or another. I said, well, usually when the light comes on, it's almost too late. Now, this was a junky old car, but I was trying to coddle it and get it going for him again. And so I've seen some engines can handle overheating better than others. You know, some engines, if they overheat once, they're toast. Some of them can overheat several times and still stay alive. I had a F-150 with a 302 in it, and I ran it through a shower of rocks. Just on the way home from work, there was somebody's road machine out there, just throwing rocks everywhere. I rode through a big hail of rocks, and didn't think anything about it. Went on a date that night, and went out to the Boondocks restaurant where the catfish served and all that, and the alligators were in the pond. And when I was on the way back, the truck got hot. I mean, it got hot enough to where it was pinging and all that, and it quit. Well, what happened was one of them rocks had pierced the radiator, and I didn't know it. You know, because I was talking to this girl that I had with me, and I just looked. I didn't pay attention to the gauge, right? We just puttering along there and all that. And but anyway, the funny thing about it was, I told her, I says, well, I got to go find a phone. So I left her sitting in the truck, fighting the mosquitoes off, and I went to get a phone, and I went to this trailer over there, because we had no cell phone. No cell phones existed in those days, and I went to the this trailer, and I knocked on the door, and I heard this guy say, come in! And the door wasn't even locked, and I just opened it up. It was at 9, you know, like 8:30 at night or something. And, you know, he was sitting there in a recliner, you know, and his wife wasn't really indecent, but in her mind she was, because she was wearing like a long t-shirt or for ready to go to bed, and she went, and she ran off and down the hall. But anyway, I says, I need a phone. He said, well, I ain't got no phone, but I'll take you to where one is. And so he drove me over here somewhere where there was a phone, and I called, and my landlord's wife brought us, came and picked us up, and we got on my other car and all that stuff. And the long and short of it is, the next morning I went out there and I poured coolant in that thing, and it fired up, and it didn't burn no oil, it didn't blow no gasket, you know, I just drove on. And it happened a second time too, something similar to that happened on that truck. It overheated twice, but it quit running, and it kept on running after that. You would not have that kind of luck with a 350 Chevrolet. You overheat it one time, it's toast. I'm sorry, it's just the way it is, you know. All right. Blown head gasket, the steam escaping, mail question, you know. The steam escaping from the thermostat housing bleeder didn't smell like a blown head gasket. What does a blown head gasket smell like? Huh? I tell you what, if you've never smelled it, it's kind of like it's a stinky wet smell. It's wet and sweet. And it's hard to explain that, but it's got a stinky sweet smell. Like,
kind of like if you poured sugar in a humidifier and walked up.
Yeah. I mean, whenever you're smelling it, you can smell that thing. Yeah, it's a sweet thing. It's a sweet smell that I don't like, obviously. And it's because, you know, and it'll be because combustion's punching it into the coolant and the water and all. But when it starts, you know, punching that water up out of there whenever you rev it up and all. Anyway. The engine absolutely could not have any trapped air, but the hot light had come on, wouldn't go off, and the Pontiac was percolating like a Model A. Now, why did I say percolating like a Model A? Model A, they ain't got no water pump. Model A never had a water pump. What it does is it percolates the coolant up, and it goes through the radiator and back into the engine again. It percolates it up out of there. That's why on the head it's got that hump going up toward the radiator. And so it basically is like a coffee maker. It just percolated on through there. All right, so cast iron impeller, aluminum timing cover. All right, so this is a lousy picture of it. But that impeller on the original water pump and on a lot of the replacement ones was cast iron. I mean, this was a heavy duty impeller. And so you kind of expect this kind of surface here to be smooth, and that it had a machine that indented thing. Well, I learned this in '84 at the Lincoln Mercury dealer, and this bookkeeper, chubby little guy with glasses and white hair, he looked just like a bookkeeper. He came in there and he said, I don't know water pump put on his car because it was leaking up. So it was a slant 6. Now, who's ever seen a slant 6 Dodge? You seen one of those? All right, the slant six Dodge is what was in all them old cars like that, you know, that thing right there. That's what the Plymouth Volare looked like. There's a Dodge Aspen, Plymouth Volare, whatever it was. And they all had the same thing in them. Now this is another funny story about this. We had a couple of those cars when I was working down in Texas. And one of them wouldn't start. They had electronic ignition on. There's the ignition module right there. And one of the mechanics we had originally taught when it won't start, you check for spark. And so he pulled the coil wire off over here because it's on that side, and he held it over to the body somewhere. And when he held it over to the body, somehow the guy that was spinning it over, it went up through the steering column and it fired him up going through the key. You couldn't make that happen again if you wanted to. Instead of hooking it to the engine, he held it to the body of the car, and it ran through the body of the car and fired the guy up that was sitting in the seat, you know. That's a how you get by, I guess. Anyway, he didn't do it on purpose. But anyway, this Dodge Aspen liquid coolant, I swapped the pump, didn't take hardly any time to do it because it was an easy water pump to change. Next day he comes back, showed me his temperature gauge. It says the Dodge is not running hot really, but it's hotter than it used to be. And I looked at it and I said, well, it doesn't really like it's running all that hot to me. It's full of coolant. He said, no. Well, this is the guy that prepares the paychecks, and I figured I need to make him happy. So I pulled it back in there and I said, send me another water pump. I don't know, there must be something wrong with this one because that's all I did. So they send me the other water pump, and I test drove it and found out it was running actually before the water pump got there, between the midway point and the hot line, so it was running a little warmer when you drove it. And he said it was running below the midway mark before. All right, so ordered the water pump. But the impeller on the first pump had a 50,000th of an inch more clearance between the blades and the pump housing than the second replacement. It made a surprising difference. When I put that water pump back on there, it cooled right down to where it was supposed to be. And that day I learned something that they don't teach in school. The stuff you learn out here and the stuff you learn on the service, on the shop floor, is stuff that they won't teach in any school. And that's some of the stuff I'm trying to share with you in here. So a lot of the times, there's a lot of people that had never seen that. That's why on that little Ranger, I took the the oil pump, water pump, and I checked it with a feeler gauge between the impeller and the reaction surface, because on this one, the reaction surface is in the timing cover, and on that one, it was actually built into the pump. Depends on which way the impeller's turned. And I pressed that thing farther closer on there and made sure it was really close, and that made it a stronger water pump. Because if it's got too much, or here's another thing. Some people may have seen, a lot of mechanics have probably seen when the electrolysis begins to eat this aluminum away, or if this is steel, if it's got a bunch of rust pits in it that are really deep, like cavitation, the water pump won't work either. Because it's been rusted away, or dissolved away. All right. So anyway, there was 70,000ths of an inch from the impeller to pump on the new pump, and 20 thousandths on the old pump. The old pump was leaking. And this is what I'm talking about right here. You see that right there? The distance between here and here is what I'm talking about. Now, something else, this one over here, and I didn't take a really good picture of that, and I probably should have. This one here is rusted away. Now, occasionally you'll see these rusted so bad there's nothing in there but a spinning disc. I actually saw one pickup that this thing rusted and fell off of, and it wouldn't overheat unless you tried to drive it. If it was out, it would never overheat. But this one right here is laying on that shelf behind Zane Jones over there. You can pick that. You can see that one right there. See that one right there? See how rusty that impeller is and all that kind of stuff? That'll make them run hot. Whenever you're sitting in a classroom and somebody's talking about this, you roll your eyes and you sigh and you say, maybe in a minute he'll be done and we can go to lunch. You know, I'm really tired of this. But whenever you're out there trying to work on one and your paycheck's on the line because you're going to make more money if you can figure this out and get it out of here, you're going to say, man, I'm glad I learned that because this has pointed me in the right direction, or it at least enabled me to eliminate something that could have been the problem. Now this was going through my mind about this older car while we were troubleshooting the Pontiac. It didn't have any real frame of reference. It looked fine at first glance. I mean, you looked at it and it was kind of scored, but you couldn't tell there was any metal gone. That's the point. Okay, that worn out part wouldn't let the pump move enough liquid to keep the block cool. Okay, so I got micrometer. Okay, read the mic now.
I can't see it, that's too far away.
All right, I got 0, 1, 2,
Was it 7?
and 7. Is that 207,000? Is that what it is? That's right, ain't it? All right, now this one over here, what do we got? We got 0, 1, 2, 50, 75, and almost 11. See the difference? That's how much was gone. I mean, I basically, now, honestly, I don't know about the backside of that thing, but when I measured it, this is a significant amount. So if you do the math there, you got quite a bit. You got about 80 thousandths of an inch of metal gone there. That's not good, is it? All right. So I sawed the pump. I mean, I got the old timing cover that had been screwed up. And basically what I did here is I put a good water pump in there that I had, and then I sawed it right here. I don't know where that thing is. It's back there somewhere, but I couldn't find it, but I did find this timing cover. And so this one here was sawed off. And what we did was, I had a junk engine back there that was slated to be thrown away, and it had a timing cover on it that would fit that car. And so we pulled this timing cover, not this one, but one like this off of that engine, and put it on this guy's car, which wasn't really that hard to do, you know. And then we put the new water pump on there, and that pretty well took care of that. The old pump and machine to cover, but that right there is what I saw whenever I cut it out. It was fairly out. Well, the existing timing cover removed, and found out the bad water pump had done a lot more. Well, riding on good bearings, everything was fine, but when it went in there, it machined it out and all that. And it ran really cool. Fan cycled on and off, everything, the hot light was gone. Now, get your question sheet. If you don't have any notes on your sheet, you're probably going to be in hot water because you're supposed to have been taking notes all the time. Right? All right. A customer with a Nissan Stanza says she can start her cold engine, let it run for 30 seconds, shut it off, and when she removes the radiator cap, you hear pressure escaping. I said something about this the other day. But Jonathan had that stack of papers. Yeah, give one of those to Zach. Yeah. See what's going to.
Items sitting there on the end of the table for everybody to pick up.
All right. And we talked about this the other day. You remember what this was about? This is a pretty good test you can do if you suspect that you may have a... Now, let me ask you this. How many different ways can head gaskets blow?
A bunch.
Yeah, it's not just one way, is it? Yeah, they show a few of them on that roll gaskets thing over there. I mean, there's a few. You got, that's detonation, overheat, and incorrect torque. I mean, they just got a few little things right there. Because you can blow them between cylinders. You know, the fire ring can fail and blow between the cylinder or into the water. Or the water can go into the cylinder without compression going into the water, which seems theoretically impossible. There's all these other ways. They can leak oil. They can leak coolant to the outside. All this kind of thing. I worked with a skinny little guy named Howard one time that was about 60 years old. And he was one of the fastest mechanics I think I've ever seen. And he had this big old Lincoln with a 460 in it and a cast iron intake manifold on it. And he had it up and he raised it up and he said, look at there's water coming out from under that cylinder head. And he said, I'm going to see if they'll let me put a cylinder head gasket on it. And I walked with him back over to the to the service rider. And he got service rider got him an okay on that. And I took a short test drive that I probably wasn't gone 25 minutes. And when I came back and pulled into my service bay, he was already putting that cylinder head on the floor. I mean, I'd say 20 minutes, he had a cylinder head off of that 460. And that's a big, heavy, skinny arms, but boy, he could grab them old cast iron heads and throw them around. But anyway, the most likely cause of the problem is what? If she shuts off the radiator, if she shuts off the car after letting it run for 30 seconds, removes the radiator cap, shh. Most likely cause, write it down. All right. The owner of a 94 Ford Escort complains of a loud noise that happens intermittently and is accompanied by smoke from under the hood. He further says these things only happen when he's at a traffic light, when his climate controls are on AC or defrost. Technician A says he probably has a radiator hose that only leaks under extreme pressure. Technician B says his AC pop-off is releasing excessive refrigerant due to an inoperative engine coolant fan.
Oh, sorry.
Remember now, it's real easy to fail this test because there's only 5 questions. Think about it.
Can you reread the question?
Can I reread the question?
Yeah, I can. Hardly see it.
Loud noise happens intermittently and is accompanied by smoke from under the hood. Says these things only happen when he's at a traffic light and his climate controls are on AC or defrost. Technician A says he probably has a radiator hose that only leaks under extreme pressure. Technician B says his AC pop-off is releasing excessive refrigerant pressure due to an inoperative engine coolant fan. Out loud, somebody tell me what you're thinking.
B.
B.
All right. You say B or D?
B.
B. All right. Customer brings a low mileage 2000 model year Buick Park Avenue in for an overheating problem. Now this is obviously a long time ago if it's the low mileage Park Avenue, but this gives you an idea of where you need to look for stuff. Technician A says he thinks there's a technical service bulletin with instructions to use sandpaper on the radiator filler neck. Technician B says the thermostat's probably stuck. Which of these would be the most sensible first choice when diagnosing?
Sandpaper on the radiator filler neck.
All right, now watch carefully. Technical service bulletin. Engine running hot, overheating or loss of coolant, polish the radiator filler neck and replace the radiator. And obviously that must have come from, I think this radiator must have been made of Chinesium or something, you know what I'm saying? 99 to 2,000 passenger cars and trucks with composite radiator intake. Now I will tell you this, we had this caravan that we had put a radiator in that we got up here at the parts house. And she says, this thing is percolating all the time. It's always percolating and pushing coolant out, and we're having to put coolant in it all the time. And it's always pushing the coolant out of it. And so when I took the radiator cap off of it, I mean, it was on there, but it didn't feel like it took any effort to pull it off or put it back on. And I looked at that rubber gasket, and it didn't have any sort of an indention, you know, where that raised place in the bottom of the cap usually makes one on a radiator cap. I mean, it looked, the little rubber looked brand new. And so I said, you know, I think that radiator's built wrong so that there's too much space between the top of it and where it spring's supposed to push it. So I got another gasket off of another radiator cap I had, and I stacked that rubber. When I stacked that rubber and I pushed it down on there, it made it a lot tighter, and all of that percolating went away. I mean, that is you gotta have pressure on that coolant or it's gonna percolate. Doesn't mean there's a problem somewhere else if it's percolating. Make sure your radiator cap's not bad too, you know.
Or engine.
You said it was overheating. Is it losing water too, or is it?
What's that, percolating?
No, that.
Oh, this one here, yeah, it was doing the same thing that I'm talking about on that Dodge Caravan. Technician A says, if you disconnect the temperature gauge sender feeding a magnetic temperature gauge, the gauge will go to the hot side of the gauge. That's it, as opposed to a bimetal gauge, right? Bimetal gauge is the old 70s and back. Technician B says if you ground the temp gauge sender wire, the gauge will go to the cold side of the gauge. Who's right about that? What's happened, if you disconnect the temp gauge sender, what's the needle gonna do? Hmm?
Oh,
It'll fall. Well, how many hit the other thing? If you disconnect a fuel gauge on a lot of cars, I mean, I'm not gonna say I do it on every car, but if you disconnect a fuel gauge sending unit, what does it do?
go full.
Goes past full. So you short those two wires together, it goes below empty. You unplug them, it goes past full. That's on a lot of cars, magnetic gauges. On this one here, when you unplug it, you know, it obviously goes to empty to cold, and when you short it, it goes past full. Technician A says the temperature stamped on a thermostat is the temperature at which the thermostat should begin to open. Technician B says removing the engine thermostat will usually make an engine run hot.
No.
Who's right about that? Hmm? So if we pull the thermostat out, it's gonna run hot.
Yeah,
I'd
because it
say
don't
so,
have.
because it
No,
don't
it's
trans-
just getting straight water all the
Yeah,
time.
no,
Yeah,
it's
it
not.
can't carry none of that heat off.
So if we pull the thermostat out, it's gonna run hot.
On some
No, it's
vehicles,
gonna run cold.
on the older ones it wouldn't.
Well, it depends. If you had an old cracker box 65 Mustang with a little hot water 6 in it, and you pull the thermostat out, it would run hotter. If you pull the thermostat out of just about any and every other car, if it's got a regular thermostat, you know, and it's not opening one hole and closing another one, it'll run bone cold. That's why when the thermostat spring breaks, it's like not having a thermostat. It just runs freezing cold all the time. And you got no heat. That's why, don't you remember, if you looked up at Ranger we were fighting with for running too cold, everything you read said thermostat, 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 thermostat. If you pull the thermostat out, you know, thermostat stuck closed, it'll run too hot. Because they can't get enough through the heater core to cool it. You can also turn on your heater if it's trying to run a little bit hot on one, and it'll cool it down some too, but it won't be up all that much. But anyway, that's how that runs. But there was this one knothead that I knew when I used to go to this coffee shop, and I would talk to this, you know, postman over there. He's an old semi-retired post office guy, and I talked to some other people that work there. And this one knothead came in there and he says, every time you take a thermostat out of any car, it will run hot. And I said, that's not so. Now, I don't know what that guy did for a living or how much work he had done, but that just absolutely wasn't so. And you cannot say always, never, you know what I mean? Because there's always that one time. Now, listen to this. This one guy, he sent me an email and he said, my van is running too cold. I don't remember the Dodge or something, mini caravan, front wheel drive. And he says, my Dodge is just running too cold. It's running too cold. And I says, well, that's usually the thermostat. I don't really know what else to tell you. Of course, I have heard people say, if the fan's on all the time, it'll make it run too cold and all that. But he wasn't having that problem. And whenever all of that smoke cleared and the flurry of emails stopped, he says, I found out what was wrong with it. I had my belt routed wrong. I don't know. Maybe, you know, I mean, I can't really say that that's not possible, but I usually try to reason stuff out, you know. And why would this do this? It's spinning, like on some of the Jeeps. Now think about this. This is important, or I won't be saying it. On some of the Jeeps, depending on how kind of a package it was come through, the water pump, like if you've got a water pump that's got a smooth pulley on it, like this one here on the outside, now it's going to turn the opposite direction of the engine, right? If you've got one that's got a grooved pulley, it's going to turn the same direction as the engine. But what if the vehicle, if that engine could have either one of those on it? And what if somebody threw you a water pump out there that was made to turn counterclockwise because it came with a smooth pulley, and you put it on an engine that took a grooved pulley? Now you've got a water pump that's pulling backwards. It'll be the water pump that bolts up in there. But when you're looking at those water pumps, they need to have the impellers pointed, so don't fall into that trap. That's like having a brake caliper that somebody sells you that's supposed to go on the left, and you put it on the right, or if you buy two of them and you put them on there backwards, the bleeders are on the bottom. They'll fit. You won't never get the air out of them. You know what I mean? I mean, the air goes up and the bleeder's on the bottom. So, I mean, there's a lot of little things you need to pay attention to that will, you know, cause these other people that have got bad tempers to do this. Throw their rag down, you know, and say ugly words and all that kind of thing, you know. I want better for that than you guys, right? All right.
So who is right? Nate? Figures Nate?
Yeah, because it's stamped.
The temperature stamped on a thermostat is the temperature at which a thermostat should begin to open. Now, if I wanted to write this question the right way, I'd say technician B says removing the engine thermostat will always. Well, I said usually, and it won't usually. It can, but it won't usually. That's why I did that.
That's right.
Yep. And on that one there, we know that one. Huh?
What was number one?
Yeah, go back to number one.
All right, number one. Wait a minute. You take the radiator cap off, and here's the hissing. You got the blowing head gasket.
Alright, that's right.
That's what that is.
I just didn't have the letter.
Yep. All right. That look good? Everybody got it?